90 metres down off the coast of Virginia. A shipwreck that nobody had ever touched. Crockery still scattered across the deck. Portholes, a helm, every artefact sitting exactly where it was left the day she went down.
It is blatantly obvious that this is a virgin shipwreck.
Before the dive, Richie Kohler had made a promise. I'll find the bell.
Put my head up and I went, "You've got to be effing kidding me."
He found it, sitting right there on the deck since 1943. This is the story of the first dive on the Olinda.
So a few years back, Dom, a guy named Ben Roberts from Eastern Search and Survey was going up and down the eastern seaboard in his little tiny boat, just himself. He would pack a lunch and he would spend hours upon hours doing nothing more than side scanning wrecks. And he wasn't doing this for any other reason than to just go out and find new wrecks. Now, he's a diver, but he was actually looking for wrecks that he at that time couldn't dive. They were just way too deep. And one of these wrecks was in an area that was being contested by different people. Guys from the DV Tenacious were down there and they thought that they had located a German submarine. And then other people went down there and they put an ROV on it and confirmed that it wasn't a German submarine. It was actually an American submarine. Both of these submarines were actually World War I targets sunk as part of what we here call the Billy Mitchell fleet. Basically, it was post-World War I ships towed out, and then aircraft were used to attack them. And this gentleman named Billy Mitchell pioneered the concept that aircraft could sink capital ships. Of course, the big Navy hated that. So the reason why I mentioned this little bit of background is because this area off of Virginia is not littered, but that's the word I would use. You know, you guys have a lot more wrecks. So if I'm using the term littered, it would be a speckling compared to the English Channel. So there's a speckling of shipwrecks out there. Some big ones, a German battleship called the Ostfriesland, and then there's just a number of wrecks out there. But the problem was that navigation post-World War I wasn't what it is today. So the locations were very vague and lost. The depths are close to 85, 90 meters, so they're not shallow. It's not like sport divers were going out there. So to get back to Ben Roberts, he's out there mowing the lawn, and he's looking for unidentified and lost shipwrecks. And he comes across this one target. And it was in an area that someone had said this is where one of those German submarines after World War I was sunk as a target. But this guy, by this time, Ben is like really dialed in. You know, as you'll see a little later when we look at his side scans, they're really, really good. I mean, they're so good that Ben was able to look at his side scan, compare it to historical photos, and realize that the wreck that had been believed to be a German U-boat was actually a freighter. And not only that, he went so far as to find a photograph of that freighter and compared it. And he called me up and a couple of other guys and says, "Hey, look, I think I found this shipwreck called the Olinda, but you know, until you dive it, there's no proof positive." So a gentleman named Rustin Casway, who runs a dive boat up here, said, "Hey, let's go out there. Let's go find this ship. Let's do it." And you know, it was again close to 85 meters. It's kind of deep, and it's in an area that can be frequented by the very strong currents. So it's again not the kind of normal thing that sport divers would be going out. Yeah, when I say sport divers, I mean no dive shop is taking people out there on the weekend. You have to have the numbers and, as you know, the wherewithal to go into 85, 90 meters, drop the shot, and do the dive. So Rusty's boat's called the Explorer, and he's done a number of really incredible finds up and down the eastern seaboard, just like DV Tenacious. But he doesn't he doesn't like really put it out there as much as they do. He's kind of a little bit more quiet. So like when he took us out there, like the same like you, kind of hush hush, not super secret, but just not beating the drum about it. So I was going to be diving with my longtime dive partner, Evan Kovacs, and he was going to go down there and document it so that hopefully we could find, some proof of what it was. So as I'm getting kitted up, I half jokingly said to Rustin Casway, the captain of the boat, he says, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to swim to the bow. I'm going to find the bell and I'm going to bring it up.
It's a great plan. I love it. It's a fantastic plan.
Cocky, right? Pretty cocky attitude. Oh, by the way, I've said that a number of times in my life.
Yeah.
Of course. As a matter of fact, to be brutally honest, the story that we're talking about in a 50-year diving career, I've had to have seen with my own eyes probably a dozen bells come up. Of those dozen bells, that's a tongue twister. Oh, wait, let me have another sip of beer.
Yeah.
Of those dozen bells that I've seen come up, I've assisted on maybe 3 or 4 of them, and I've only gotten 2 of them myself. So before I go into the Olinda story and finding the bell, I want to tell you about my very first bell, because one of the things I like to tell other wreck divers that want to, lawfully go out, find shipwreck artifacts and bring them up, is that, most ships, if you're lucky, have 2 bells. Most of them actually only have 1 bell. The majority of bells that I've seen come up sometimes don't have any identification on them. They don't identify the wreck. And sometimes they have a name that doesn't actually correlate to the name of the ship when the ship sank. So sometimes finding a bell on a ship isn't the actual, I found the name of this ship. Sometimes you've actually got to do a lot more detective work. That being said, in the wreck diving world that is enjoying the Lawful collection of shipwreck artifacts, the bell is probably the holy grail. Most divers want to find. I know that in my career, I coveted bells. I was like, always, every time I dove a virgin mark, the first thing I would do is swim around looking for the bell. And
interesting enough, Richie, I mean, you know better than I do, Lee Bishop.
Yep.
Lee Bishop will tell you that, and he's obviously, he's done a few things in his time. Yes, he will tell us that actually a maker's plate is better than a bell.
I think we can do another podcast, video podcast about that, talking about, maker's plates. Basically, how do you identify a shipwreck and what is it that you can find on a shipwreck? Believe it or not, I have actually seen a shipwreck identified by none other than my wife by a key. She actually found a key on a shipwreck that had the name on it. And maybe when we come back, and do another video, I'll have a photograph of that for you. But we had to leave it on the wreck. It was a protected wreck, but we did, thank God. Barry McGill was there. He's an incredible photographer, and he snapped a photograph where you can actually see Katie holding the key and the name of the ship on it. So sometimes it's not necessarily the big, beautiful, iconic ship's bell that's going to answer the question. Sometimes it could be a key. But that being said, let's get back to the point. Like many wreck divers, I wanted to find a bell. And just like you and like pretty much all of our ilk, I've been diving and I have seen probably 100 bells. I'm like, my light hits something. I see the brass curve. I swim over. I start digging it out, and it's a flange, or it's a pipe, or it's a bucket. That's why I say I found 100 bells. But then when I dug it out, it wasn't a bell. I mean, honestly, one of my favorite stories is we were diving these wrecks off New Jersey, and me and a fellow diver were next to each other, and we both saw what we thought was the bell. And we're swimming like bats out of heck to get to it. And then we put our hands on it, and we yank it. It was a plastic bucket. It was literally a bucket that was half buried in the sand. But, you know, when you want to find a bell, that's what you see. So
everything looks like a bell, doesn't it? Everything
much
looks like a bell. Yeah.
Now, I sent you a couple of pictures, and I want to just tell you about my very first bell. I was snorkeling in the South Pacific. And I mean, I was snorkeling. I was in no more than 8 meters, maximum 10 meters of water. And there was this broken up Japanese ship that had been there probably from World War II. It's unclear. And again, when you see the photographs, I didn't even have fins. I had a mask. And I'm swimming. And again, my partner in crime, Evan Kovacs, is with me. And we're swimming, and he is way ahead of me. And he's like, "Oh, wow, look over here. I think this is the bridge." And I'm so jealous. He got out there first. And I remember looking down, and this is a quote. I said, unquote, I put my head up and I went, "You've got to be effing kidding me." And he goes, "What?" And I took a deep breath and I swam down. And I came up holding this bell. Now, of course, I don't even have fins. So like all that came out of the water was the bell. And then I had to literally drop it or drown and let it go back down to the sand. And that's the true story. So the first bell I ever found, I wasn't even scuba diving. and it's a bridge bell. It's a very tiny bell. And but I'm very proud of it. It's obviously
yeah.
So
no such thing as a bad bell.
That was lawfully recovered from the South Pacific. So now we get to my only other bell, the second bell that I've recovered, which is the bell from the Olinda. So again, my partner in crime and I, Evan Kovacs, were the first in the water. We dropped down to make sure that the hook or the shot is set good, because another team of divers is going to follow us. And as you'll see in the video, when we come down, it is obvious, very painfully obvious, or not painfully is not the right word. It is blatantly obvious that this is a virgin shipwreck. And as you know, the reason that you know that is because crockery, dishes, portholes are laying everywhere across the wreck. And as we swim, we're videoing these things, but we're not stopping. The only time I stopped was actually to pick up one dish and put it in the bag, because maybe it had a shipping line logo on it, which can be helpful to try and, identify the wreck. As we're swimming, we see these big square windows, which were indicative or could be indicative of the same type of bridge windows that the Olinda had, and they would be in the same general area, but the wreck had broken down, and you could even see that. And another thing that I want to mention is, having seen the side scan and having that visual in your mind when you're making the dive, it's like you've seen it before. Yes, it's a shadow, but that shadow helps you navigate the difference between the stern, which is broken down, towards the bow, which is high and proud. So long story short, when we hit the wreck, we had a good idea. And then when we swam over the engines, and we could see the engine and then the boilers, now we know for a fact we're heading in the correct direction for the bridge. Yeah. So that is a stern shot of the wreck of the Olinda when she was carrying a load of lumber. And I think, that's so in that shot, if you were to zoom in, you would actually see these brass windows on the shot. And I guess we're going to go into the video now, and I'll take you on a little tour of the wreck. So it was really, really dark down there. Again, 300 feet. Actually, I think it was 325 feet to the sand, but up high, we're at 300 feet. And as we're moving along, there's so many different interesting things in the debris field that you can see. Like right there, there's a dish just tucked in there. And in the distance, you can see the strobe. And I believe that's just one of the deck windlasses that we're looking at right there. Oh, these are called chained dogfish. And by the way, we're going to be changing back and forth from my camera to Evan's camera. And you'll know Evan's camera because it's going to be a much higher quality, higher resolution film than mine. I'm shooting a GoPro, and Evan is shooting some incredibly great video. So as we're moving along now, we can see one of those beautiful and intact square bridge windows. And I know that in a few minutes, we're going to cross over the area where the bridge is. And I believe Evan and I that is me. So this is Evan's camera. There's, again, part of the rigging for another winch. And there was some of the loading equipment. And I think there's a bollard. And I think that at this point, Evan has swung over to the port side. I'm on the starboard side. So you're looking at my light, and Evan is coming around the bow, like maybe there's writing, or maybe you can see the letters. And as I turn my camera, and that's the forecastle to the left of the scene, all of a sudden I start screaming underwater, Evan, look. And I mean, you'll even see me pumping my hand right there in the shot, and sitting right on the deck since 1943 is the bell, the bow bell, or the watch bell, if you will. I don't believe it was a crow's nest because it's right adjacent to the forecastle. So it was probably on some form of a gooseneck right there. And it was just stuck and frozen down, literally cemented to the deck. And you can see I'm taking the dish and a cup out that I have. I'm like, goodbye, dish. I don't need you anymore. I'm definitely going to take this bell. Now, the first thing I do is like, okay, wait a minute. You're not coming. And I could get my fingers underneath it, but it was literally frozen, cemented, if you will, to the deck. So I take out my trusty dive knife and a little bit of leverage. You can move the world. And there she goes. So that was how I rigged it up. There's a piece of wreckage still fused to it. I did look where it had been for the clanger. I could not find it. So I believe that the clanger had fallen out. And what I did, because we were anchored into the shipwreck, and so the captain wouldn't be able to chase my bell, I actually tied it up very well. Some people would say really well, but I wasn't taking any chances because it did not have the eye on the top. So there was nothing to put a rope or a carabiner through. So, and it was too heavy or too big to fit into the bag. So I opted to rig it like this, and then fill the lift bag, and then swim it back to our upline. And then I just swam it up with me until we got to like the maybe, I don't know, 20-meter stop. And then I just kind of let it go up our upline, knowing that there was no one above us that it would interfere with. So I didn't want to just send it up in case divers were coming down. That would be bad. So yeah, you can see Evan is from. It's amazing that when you watch this, it's like, why is it taking so long? But obviously, I'm trying to be very methodical in the things that I'm doing.
What are you filling the bag up with there, Richie?
That would be my shallow nitrox. I generally don't use my deep helium for filling lift bags unless I have to, for no other reason than it's, it costs money to fill up the helium, but nitrox is a lot cheaper to replace. So I fill the lift bag up. I'm going to be swimming back. And as we're swimming back, we're looking at different artifacts. There's a lantern that Evan was just looking at. And behind Richie's back, a few other things. So these are the things that Evan was looking at. He's following me back. And as he's coming back, he's looking at the bridge. Okay, well, there's a spare anchor. Nobody was going to take that. Very photogenic, Evan, but I don't think I'm going to put a lift bag on that. But as he moves aft, and you can see my light, I'm swimming back to the the hook. Yeah, right there. Bingo. Now, I swam over that because I saw the forecastle. So I literally swam right over the collapsed bridge. But I'll be honest with you, even if I had seen that, I wouldn't have stopped. Because if I had stopped to mess with the helm and then Evan got to the forecastle, then Evan would be telling this story right now and not me. So yeah, Evan.
It's also got the wheel on it there as well, isn't it? You can see the wheel, you can see the helm. You probably heard the term around here. People talk about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 spidge, and helm's definitely tier 2.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I've got a couple of helms in the house, so I'm leaving them now. I'm not lying. I'm telling you the truth. I'd be more than happy to help one of my friends who doesn't have a helm get a helm, because to be honest with you, my motto in life is I only want one of everything, maybe two.
You wouldn't get another bell, would you, Richie?
Having a backup. Well, it depends, mate. It depends. Like I said, I've most of the guys that I know, with the exception of a good friend of mine who's sitting in this room listening to us, have never gotten more than 2 bells. And I have a friend who's gotten 2 bells off one shipwreck. And I'm like, wow. Most of my British friends, on the other hand, they've got quite a collection. So now you can see me ascending up the shot or the down line with the bell, controlling it, controlling how much air is in the bag.
That in itself is quite a tricky thing to do.
Yep. And now this is something that Evan, there's an expression, I'm sure you've heard it, payback is a bitch. Years ago, Evan got a bell. I was with him in the Gulf of Thailand. And the boat captain, there's a picture of the bell. There it is, all cleaned up. John Hawes found the helm. The helm had writing on it. The helm's writing did not help identify the wreck. And as you saw in that quick shot, the bell had no writing on it, so it was not able to definitely identify the wreck as the Olinda. But location, what we've seen of the cargo, the shape of the hull, and the crockery indicates that this is most likely, until we find either the maker's plate or something like that, I would say it's most likely the Olinda. I won't say it is definitely the Olinda, but there's the old expression, sometimes it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, so it's probably a duck.
We need to go back to Thailand.
Yeah. So this is an unusual tradition, which I also sent you other photos that I've witnessed firsthand. As I mentioned, I've been a bridesmaid on bells much more than I've been the bride. So I have seen in the UK a tradition where when a bell comes up, the man or the woman who finds the bell has to kiss or place their lips firmly on the rump of the boat captain in gratitude for the boat captain picking up their bit of spidge and throwing it on the deck for them. And so when Evan got his bell, I shared this little bit of information with a British expat who was running the boat. And he firmly said to Evan, if you want your bell, you will kiss my arse. Which Evan gave me the dirtiest look and then proceeded to. So as you can see from the expression of all the people here, you know what's about to happen in this photo. Fortunately, we don't have the actual photo or video. I'm not that proud, but I got the bell. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Not only do I know what you talk about, I've been there myself on several occasions. In fact, one of the things I'm pleased to say is that on 2 separate occasions I've taken the bell virginity of two boat skippers. So James Beluza, who I know you know, and his business partner Ben Kellett, both of them I provided their first bells, and I exposed them to the ceremony. So I've been there.
And you know what? Again, it is such a rare At least here on this side, it is a rare thing to find a bell. It is more common, I think, in the waters surrounding the UK for obvious reasons. You just have much more history, maritime history, more shipwrecks, more opportunity to find a bell than we do here in the northeastern United States. But I will say this: in the entire United States, the northeastern part, from, let's say, Maine down to North Carolina, is our proliferation of shipwrecks. That is where the majority of them were sunk either by storm, accident, collision, and of course the depredations of U-boats during World War I and World War II.
Yeah. I've got a little segue here, Richie. I just did some diving a couple of weeks ago with a guy from America, but who was actually German. So he'd gone over to America and was working over there, came back to the UK to do some diving with us. And we were going out and we were diving a load of shipwrecks. And he was like, how did this one sink? And I was like, oh, that was the Germans. And he was like, how did this one sink? I was like, oh, that was the Germans as well. How about this one? Yeah, that was the Germans. At that point, he stopped asking.
Funny that you mentioned on one of the early dive boats that I started diving on, which was called the Sea Hunter 1. There was actually 3 of them. That's how long this boat captain ran charters. But his original boat, the Sea Hunter 1, he had a black and white photograph of Admiral Karl Donitz, who was the admiral in charge of German U-boats during World War II, and a little placard beneath it that said, patron saint of North Atlantic wreck divers. because Admiral Donitz and the German U-boats gave us the majority of the shipwrecks that we dive here. So, yeah. Okay. Now, before we call it a night, because I'm out of beer and I've got places to go, I want to just end on a note that I think everybody will enjoy. You ready?
And that is the bell. That is the Olinda's bell. Oh man, beautiful.
Yep, I gave you another still photo of how it looks in its finished form, cleaned up, properly mounted. And you know what? On a final note, when people say, "Oh, you took that," I'll never see it. As you're aware, a majority of the shipwrecks we dive, only a handful of people have the wherewithal, the skill, and the ability to visit them, much less locate, find, and extricate a bell or any shipwreck item. And all of the artifacts that I've recovered have been done within the letter of the law. This particular wreck, the Olinda, was in international waters. It's an abandoned shipwreck. So therefore, bringing it back to land in an effort to identify it, putting it out on the internet, letting it be known that I've recovered the bell. If the owner of the shipping line, or we do not have a receiver of wreck in the United States as you do in the UK, but as long as you're public about it, I never sell artifacts. So the artifacts that I bring up are properly restored, and therefore they're enjoyable. I share, as you know, like you do on YouTube, the history of the artifact, the location of it, what it takes to restore it, and of course the ship's history. And again, I know I'm probably beating a dead horse to you, because I know that you also report all of your findings to the receiver of wreck. So everything we do is legal by the letter of the law and admiralty law. So, the people that feel, oh, by taking these artifacts, there are places in the world and in the country, in the United States, where wrecks are protected and you cannot take anything. I don't take anything there. I obviously operate within the constraints of the law. And for people who want to go see bells and helms, go diving in the Great Lakes, go to Chuck Lagoon. There's lots of different places in the world where the artifacts are protected. And then there are wrecks where it is lawful for you to recover objects. So that's all I got to say to head off the naysayers before they come.
Yeah, there's always people who disagree with things. And you know what? That's part of the human condition, isn't it? And you know what? I'd love to meet the diver who's dived to 100 meters on a virgin wreck and found a bell and then gone, do you know what? I'm gonna leave it there. There's not very many of those. So
No, and you know what? Again, I recognize like there's great divers doing incredible work in the Baltic where those wrecks are protected because of how small the Baltic is and the conflict. It's not international waters, and so therefore those shipwrecks are protected, and you can go down. And also, it's a very benign environment, the Baltic, compared to, let's say, the English Channel or the North Atlantic. Okay. These wrecks are collapsing. You looking at the Olinda. If you go back in 20 years, where I found the bell will have collapsed to the seabed. And the bell may have fallen under a steel plate or been buried under mud. And then it doesn't matter who you are, you're never going to see it.
I mean, the fact that the top of the bell has been broken off indicates that a process of degradation has taken place, hasn't it? So there's been some big force on that bell to break it off the hanger, to break off the hook on the top. And that the only way that has happened is, I guess it's one of two things. Either some sort of fishing activity, it's been snagged by a trawler or anything. I don't know if that happens in that area. Or the other thing is the wreck has broken, and as part of breaking, it has broken that thing off. But you're absolutely right. That bow, I mean, you just need to look at it. At that point, some point, that bow is going to collapse. Everything will fall down. And the risk is that the bell and the helm and all those kind of things get buried and smashed or whatever else it is. And I'm with you. I think for me, ethically, never mind legally, ethically, the right thing to do is stuff that is on the seabed that can be used to identify stuff or has value should be recovered to the surface rather than leaving it down there where it will probably end up getting lost.
I've been living that. And again, I kind of emphasize it because there is law. We have to be lawful. We have to operate within the constraints of it. And understand that. And if you're a wreck diver, it's up to you to know what the laws are and obey them. And that's why I love diving in international waters. I like diving in places where I can report my finds and then ultimately be the owner of it. And then, as I mentioned to you in our private conversation, I've had the wonderful experience, and I know you have as well, where you've recovered a bell and then you've returned it to the Navy or the government because it was a war grave. And that bell was proof positive of identifying that sailor's grave. And so responsible divers would do that. If you find the bell and then all of a sudden you realize that now this is a military war grave, and then you return it to the appropriate government, as you've done. Or in other cases, we've recovered bells on behalf of the government so they could be put in a museum. So, recently I've done that on behalf of the Greek Efret, so that the Bell of Britannic can go into a museum where it could be enjoyed by people who will now go in. Children will go in, they will learn the story, and it's being shared. So, there's many different sides to the Bell story.
Sat on that seabed since 1943, undisturbed, forgotten until this dive.
When people say, oh, you took that, I'll never see it. As you're aware, a majority of the shipwrecks we dive, only a handful of people have the wherewithal, the skill, and the ability to visit them, much less locate, find, and extricate a bell or any shipwreck item.
More people will see that bell on land and on here than will ever see it at 90 metres. The story isn't forgotten anymore. This is just one more wreck amongst the thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands that exist around the world, all of them with stories that deserve to be told. And if you want to hear more stories like this, I've got a whole load of them on my channel. Mysteries that we've solved, mysteries that we haven't solved, and you should be able to click on these links to go and watch some of them. I'm Dom Robinson, Deep Wreck Diver, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.